Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, your brother, and your friend, Rashid, and you are tuned into the most powerful, most informative platform for truth, bar none, on God's green earth. This is your platform for education, elevation, and edification. This is the Red Pill Diaries. Hey, thank you all for giving me your time and for joining me today. We had it scheduled for earlier this morning, but I have to be mindful that sometimes I have to change the times for some of the people who watch the show from across the pond or around the globe. So sometimes we may do it like in the morning, like tomorrow we're supposed to have Gregory Manarino on 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern time, and then the following day we're supposed to have my guy Brian Berletic on. Check the times and schedules for that. Again, today's show is titled Live Into the Fire. Biden okays strikes into Russia. Now, we don't truly know if that is the case, but we know that the Washington Post and the New York Times and all of the so-called, I won't say newspaper, I would just say the scribes, in biblical and Quranic times, the scribes were the people who disseminated information to the masses, but they disseminated it for the use by the elite to push an agenda or to put out fillers or to indoctrinate and inundate people with what the elite were trying to do. So I call those newspapers like the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the BBC, all of that stuff, the scribes, because all they have an agenda, and their agenda is to maintain US, UK, and Western hegemony at all costs. Okay, so shout out to everybody who's joining me. Shout out to Kelly. Kelly, I did not erase your comments in the chat. I don't know what happened to them, but maybe they'll pop back up. All right, I think this was in here. So I want to talk to you guys about a few things. All right, about this, if it has been okay, and I do believe that some of this is fillers. Notice that the White House has not said much about it, has not denied, has not confirmed publicly that this is the case, right? And I believe that even if they've authorized it, they're holding it back because they're putting out fillers to see the reaction of their so-called allies and their enemies, see what Russia's response and reaction would be, and see what China's response and action would be, and see what the global South's response and actions would be. You understand? And if there was not a lot of blowback, a lot of pushback, a lot of condemnation, then they would go ahead with it. And if Russia would not stand on its square of what it said would happen if this took place, I believe that then they would go ahead with it. Now, they still may go ahead with strikes. Will they? You can't put anything past the United States and the UK, France and Germany, and these people. These people are evil as hell who run these countries. We see that how they don't say anything about the mass murder across North Africa by their armed and trained terrorists to cause chaos so that they can prevent the Belt and Road Initiative over there. You see how they are arming and training terrorists and separatists across Latin America and across West Asia. They don't care about life as they go around the world trying to preach to everybody else about life, about security, about peace, and about rules. They violate and break all of these to attain the goal of total hegemonic rule, full spectrum dominance, as F. William Engdahl termed it. And they will kill off nations. They will destroy infrastructure, institutions, governments, governors, leaders, movements, parties, anything to submit their rule. And until we get that in our head, we're in bad shape. Now, I want to go to something real quick as we're talking, okay? Shout out to everybody. Please hit the like button, okay? Please hit the like button or hit the dislike button. Whatever button you hit, just hit one, okay? All right. I want to go to something real quick. All right. So before we go further. It just came to me. Okay, lunacy. This is what we describe the policies of Joe Biden and his entourage, his minions of the UK and the, well, I wouldn't even say the UK is a subordinate to the US. I would say the United States is militarily more powerful, but the UK calls some of the shots, regardless of what everybody says. Okay, because if they didn't, why do they control the money flow? And what I mean about that, they control the gold trade globally. He who runs the money calls the shots. Okay, so listen. The word lunacy, according to the dictionary, is a noun. It means the state of being a lunatic, insanity, not in technical use. Insanity, madness, mental illness, derangement, dementia. Whoa, that last one covers the person who rules this country, right? So-called rules this country, Mr. Joe Biden, right? Lunacy. He is suffering from what? Derangement, mental illness. His whole cabinet is, right? Madness, insanity, because he's doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Each time he says that I won't do X, Y, and Z because this could escalate into nuclear superpowers on the battlefield, and this would be World War III. And then he goes and puts the anti-tank missiles. Then he goes in and puts the HIMARS. Then he puts the attackers. He puts the tanks, the Abrams. Then he puts the F-16s in, right? And now he's, according to the reports, is authorizing deep strike weapons into Russia, which cannot be operated by Ukrainians and must be operated by what? By U.S. military personnel. So this would mean a direct strike on Russian territory by NATO, which they've been doing, but this would go to the extreme because this would be in Russia proper and not the periphery of Russia. Okay, but I warned the Russians this a while ago when they allowed, after telling the U.S. and after telling NATO that if you strike X, Y, and Z, we will respond to you. And then Russia allowed them to hit Belgorod and the surrounding areas. If you give the bully an inch, he will take 45 miles. And now they're in Kursk. But had Russia been more blunt about it and had handled this from the jump, this would have blunted any madness by this dementia patient and his crew. Okay? This is what is being talked about in the news. Let's go to something. Because I'm working without a mouse on this computer. My cat broke the mouse on this computer today, and I didn't know it until right before airtime. But my other ones are right here, so it may be slow pickings for a second. Okay, I hate to use my fingers to scroll across. Seems like it gets numb. Okay, but I want to go to something. Where is it at? All right, here we are. Let's go to this clip here. Check this out right here.
Washington has reportedly allowed Kiev to use American-supplied long-range missiles against internationally recognized Russian territory for the first time. That's according to unnamed U.S. officials cited by the New York Times. This comes just 2 months before the Biden administration leaves the White House and hands over the presidency to Donald Trump. Let's get more details on this. Let's cross to our senior correspondent, Murad Gazdiev, who's in the embattled Donetsk Republic right now. Good to see you, Murad. So what do we know so far about this reported escalation of the military conflict?
Well, according to various Western publications who have come out and said that the Biden administration has, despite differences and disagreements and opposition amongst Biden's own advisors, has given Ukraine permission to strike with Attack-MS missiles or Army tactical missile systems. These are missiles made by the United States, very advanced technology that was supplied to Ukraine to strike with those missiles into Russian territory. We're talking about the Kursk region, into which Ukraine has advanced since May this year. The reasoning that has been provided by pundits is that they fear that the Ukrainian lines there will soon collapse. The Ukrainian military is in a desperate situation there, and so the Biden administration has made the decision. This is perhaps the most serious escalation in recent years, made the decision to allow Ukraine to strike with advanced American missiles deep into Russian territory. Any way you look at it, whether it's 50 miles or 100 miles, it is still deep into Russian territory. Now, one of the arguments that they used is that Russia has conscripted or secured thousands of North Korean fighters to fight against Ukraine or Ukrainian troops in Russia, not on Ukrainian territory, which, of course, is the entire paradigm. It is the argument that Moscow will undoubtedly use, because Moscow has reiterated time and time again, from Putin on downwards, that those missiles are fired using coordinates provided by NATO satellites, and the flight paths input into the missiles are always done so input by NATO troops. Ukraine lacks the capacity, the specialists to do so themselves. And this, not only for Russia and Ukraine and the United States, but at this point for the whole world, opens up a Pandora's box.
It's not a question of allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. It is a question of deciding whether or not a NATO country could be directly involved in a military conflict. If this decision is made, it will mean nothing else but the direct participation of NATO countries, the United States, European countries in the war in Ukraine. This is their direct participation. It will mean that NATO countries, the United States, European countries are at war with Russia. And if that is the case, then having in mind the change in the very essence of this conflict, we will take appropriate decisions based on the threats that will be presented to us.
To reiterate Vladimir Putin, if long-range missiles are used to target Russian territory, it would mean that NATO is complicit in an attack on Russia, which, of course, can be seen as a declaration of war if you look at Vladimir Putin's words. Specifically, though Russia may choose, as he said, Russia may choose to answer these threats and these challenges in ways that it deems fit. Nevertheless, this is a dramatic escalation, done so 2 months before Joe Biden leaves office with his team and Donald Trump comes in. And Donald Trump's vice president, J.D. Vance, has already said that he sees a peace through Ukraine giving up lost territory. This will make it much harder to reach an agreement, to begin negotiations, now that Western missiles programmed by Western specialists are being fired into Russia. A dramatic escalation and perhaps a turning point for a war that has gone on for far too long.
Everybody, they say Biden authorized. This is what Western reports, Western scribes are saying. They say media, but we know that they're controlled, state-controlled organs. But they're saying Biden organized this. Now, let us look at this. And Biden authorized this, okay? Let us look at Biden, his state. Let us see if you believe that he has the mental capacity to authorize this. Let us just look at something. This is about 12 to 13 seconds, okay? And I want you to tell me if you believe that he authorized it, or that his team, his crew behind, those people behind him that are pulling the strings authorized it, okay? I want you to just look at this. This man is in a press conference and walks off into the jungle, closes the book and walks towards the bushes. Do you, man? Stop this! Stop this! Hey, you know what I have to say about that? I'm gonna tell you what. If you want me to believe that he has all his faculties, and that people behind the scenes are not pulling the string. Check this out.
What you talking about, Willis?
There is no flipping way. No way. But in reality, what we're watching is a march towards war. Now, this is not the U.S. alone. There's an article saying that NATO countries are preparing populations for war. You have nations handing out pamphlets and all kinds of stuff of what to do if war breaks out. You have, insanity. When you become desperate and you feel that you have exhausted all means, right, to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, and you feel that what you're trying to accomplish is vital, you become desperate because your mind can't see out of the box because you're so boxed in that you've tried everything inside the box. And so you start to panic. And so you're no longer thinking rational. And so when you start thinking, matter of fact, desperation is a hell of a drug, right? According to the definition, desperation is a noun. It means a state of despair, typically one which results in rash or extreme behavior, hopelessness, despair, distress, anguish, pain, agony, torment. What are we watching with the disillusionment of the American and the UK empire? What are we watching as Europe becomes unglued? What are we watching as it becomes deindustrialized? What are we watching as the American economy spins out of control? What are we watching as the political centers of power shift from west to east? What are we watching from these leaders as the economic power shifts from west to east? And the military power is now shifting from west to east. What are we watching? Anybody with a rational judgment, with a sound mind, will say that the policies are not making sense and they're pushing everybody to war, and these leaders are not representing the people, they're representing total madness, right? Right? Why? Because of desperation. All of their policy initiatives have failed. They've tried to overthrow people in North Africa. They failed with Traoré. They failed in Mali. They failed, and when I say Traoré, I'm talking about the Burkina Faso. They failed in Mali. They failed in Niger. They failed in CAR. They failed in Chad. They're failing in the Congo. All of this stuff. They're failing in Lebanon. They're failing in Syria. They're failing in Iraq. They failed with their plans with Iran. They failed in Central Asia. They're failing in Ukraine. They failed in Georgia. Right? So this breeds desperation. They're failing in Bolivia. They're failing everywhere you look, everywhere you turn. Their policies, initiatives of total domination and global hegemony is failing or has failed. The things that used to work 30 years ago, the assassinations, the color revolutions, the economic manipulation, right? The stoking of tensions between different parts of civil society of different nations, the threat of war, and the use of threats to coward nations, all of this is no longer working as it once did. That breeds desperation because these are the levels of power that the empire used to keep other nations in check. To show you how mad this is not just confined to America. This is the American NATO terror machine, right? Now, what more or how more crazy can you get if your economy is being deindustrialized through your insane sanctions against Russia, right? I'm talking about Germany, right? You lose your economic growth is no more. You are absolutely dying economically, and people are losing their way of life, their position, and the middle class is being destroyed, right? And I'm using Germany as an example, but this can be said and seen in every Western nation, okay? We see that Germany relies on China for trade and investment, right? And then Germany then tries to tell their people, hey, listen, we are going to try our best to close down some of these plants so that we can consolidate. That's what they want to use. They don't want to say that these companies are going bankrupt. They want to tell you we're consolidating to make it stronger. No. Well, why weren't you said they were strong 20 years ago when it was booming? Why are you consolidating? Because the revenue is drying up for all of these branches. So with Volkswagen, they're closing down plants, right? And their main plants, that the part of Volkswagen that makes the money now for Germany is in China, right? That's the part that is making the money for Germany. Then you have the German foreign minister. Tell me if this is not lunacy at its height. Tell me if this is not desperation at its highest. On RT, they have an article that says Germany issues threat to China. Now listen, China is one of, if not Germany's largest trade partner, and is the largest investor. And your companies are only existing in China. They're only making profits in China, and these profits go back to Germany to try to keep the German economy afloat, which keeps Europe afloat, because Germany is the economic engine to the European Union, right? Suicide, right? Boom, right? You say the German foreign minister has warned Beijing. Listen to this. And tell me if this is not lunacy. The German foreign minister has warned Beijing of consequences for allegedly supporting Moscow. Now, before we read a little bit more of this, let's address that real quick, okay? Do you not see the hypocrisy here? Let your friend, let your brother, let your host talk to you for a minute. Have you ever noticed that America, Germany, and the UK and all of these terrorist nations or leaderships, right? The terrorist leaders of this global terror network called NATO publicly state, we will support Ukraine to the end. We will defend our allies. We will do X, Y, and Z. And as soon as an ally of another nation that they don't like supports that nation, or there are hints or whispers that they may support their strategic interests by supporting their ally, this is unacceptable to America, unacceptable to the UK, unacceptable to Germany, unacceptable to France. But it is acceptable for them to aid and abet each other in terror and pillaging and robbing and in war. That's that exceptional mind. How dare you aid your brother? How dare you give him a slingshot? How dare you transfer to him microchips or transfer to him missiles? And then at the same time, you get on TV, get in the newspaper, and you brag about F-16s, tanks, Bradleys, Storm Shadows, Attackums, all of this stuff. So that is okay. That's okay. But just a hint of China, who is in a strategic partnership with Russia. It is not okay for China to live up to its end of that strategic partnership by aiding Russia. I mean, the lunacy. Man, I'm telling you, these people, it has been ingrained in Western society, in Western leadership, that only they have the right to do this, because they've broken up partnerships and relationships in so-called military alliances for so long, because they've had the economic, the political, and the military clout to do it. And now no longer can they bully everybody, so they issue threats. You better not do this. If you do this, consequences. Well, Germany, what the hell are you going to do? Huh? What do they say? Pee or get off the pot? Talk to me. Shout out to Phobos Moon, and shout out to Ping One. I can't give my brother a slingshot, but you're giving your brothers bazookas. Matter of fact, you're not even giving your brothers a bazooka. You're giving the people next door to me bazookas, hand grenades, and everything. And you're mad that I'm handing him a bag of rocks, my friend? You want me totally disarmed. You want him totally disarmed. Why? Why? So that you can pillage and rape me at will. That is the hint why they have all of these agreements, these international treaties. the non-proliferation agreement, where you get nuclear technology, but you can only go so far. And then America tells you, UK tells you, France tells you, oh, we're going to up our nuclear arsenal, or we're going to modernize it. And then they scream that Iran may be thinking about acquiring one. And you got an arsenal of 250, 300, and 5,000. I'm showing you the mind of the lunatics of the West. Rules for thee, but not for me. So when we talk about an international rules-based order, these rules are solely based on what America thinks, what the UK thinks, what NATO thinks. Nobody can have a nuclear weapon. We will do our best to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Why? You got thousands of them. But these are the most deadly weapons. Well, how about you set the example and you disarm? Huh? How about this? Let us look at, if I'm a terrorist state, then what the hell are you? You've been at war for 200 plus years of your existence. Nobody on earth used nuclear weapons but you. So if somebody's going to disarm and not be allowed to have them, how about let us start with the only person that used them? Why don't we use this as common sense, as a basis for disarmament? No, because it's America and she thinks that she's exceptional. Because it's the UK, because they think that they're exceptional. It's Germany, it's France, because they think that they're better than everybody else. And you can tell it by the policies. It doesn't matter what they say. Look at the actions. Look at the actions. Huh? So let's read this. We're reading this together because I just saw this like a few minutes ago while I was talking to y'all about the German minister. So listen, German foreign minister, and let me get me a little. I had to get a little water. German foreign minister Annalena Baerbock has threatened Beijing with sanctions. Sanctions. This is tantamount to getting a gun. It's a six-chamber gun. And you're putting 4 bullets in it, and you're spinning it around, and then you put it up to your head. China's your banker, your investor, and it allows your corporations to make profits in China. Now, what can you do that would be more detrimental to China than China can't do to you? Especially as you have become deindustrialized. And if you do this and start this tariffs or trade war with China, and China hits you back, this has ramifications not just for Germany, but all across Europe. It will reverberate, and all the way across the pond to America, because America is the #1 economic engine of the Western world, but Germany is the #2 economic engine of the Western world. And if they hiccup, America farts. If America farts, Germany hiccups. And if that happens, then the whole entirety of the Western world comes down with pneumonia. These people don't think through. This is what I'm telling you about the desperation. Because when you become desperate, you don't think rational. There's a fog over your brain, and you just go with the motion right at the moment and not thinking about the consequences or the ramifications and repercussions on the other side. Look at what happened when they jumped in and stole Russia's reserves in Europe. Look what happened when they banned Russia's oil and gas and all of this stuff like fertilizer and cooking oil and all that stuff. Look at what happened when they cut Russia off the SWIFT. Russia has now become the 4th largest economy in the world. The economy is booming. And look what happens to Europe. And look at what's going on in the United States. These people are absolute maniacs. I call them berserker nations. Okay? Look up that word berserker. So listen. It goes on to say, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock has threatened Beijing with sanctions during a meeting in Brussels. where top EU diplomats gathered to discuss recent intelligence. Evidently, they're not so intelligent, right? Intelligence suggesting that China is providing military support to Russia amid the Ukraine conflict. China is providing it. Iran is providing it. Venezuela is now providing it. Man, these people are, North Korea is providing it. They don't want to just say Russia is outmaneuvering, outproducing, outgunning, outmanning, and beating the brakes off the entirety of the Western world. They don't want to give that. They want to put somebody in it. It's somebody else's fault. Remember I told you guys that? When it comes to the US, the UK, France, Germany, and the West, it's never their fault. It's always somebody else's fault while the plan is not going according. It's always somebody else's fault while things are falling apart. They don't sit and think, well, maybe these sanctions are destroying the economy. Well, maybe the ban on oil, cheap oil and gas, which I need to fund my economy, is causing the collapse. They don't think about the alienation of nations that they need to buy their debt. They don't think about that. That's not a cause of the problem. It's you. It's never me, it's you. This is the mind of a child. A spoiled brat. It's like a baby. It's like two babies in the room. And I'm not talking about Russia. I'm talking about with the West. It's like two babies in the room. One baby has a bottle. And the other baby is crying for the bottle. And the other baby doesn't care if that baby gets a bottle or not. All they care about is them. It's all about them. The whole world is centered around them. Because the mind is not mature enough to understand that the world does not revolve around it. It takes weeks and months and years and decades to develop your mind to think outside of that selfish little paradigm that you're in. And when we look at the West, they have not matured mentally. It's like they have hit a growth bump. And their growth is stunted and they are mildly retarded or something. All right. So Baerbock says this. Baerbock says, man, I need a little bit more water. Incognito, baby. Shout out. Ahead of the meeting on Monday, a senior EU official indicated that reports, these reliable reports from intelligence sources pointed to the existence of a factory inside China producing drones that are shipped to Russia. The unnamed source described the allegations as convincing. Unnamed sources, right? And these reports said that the allegations are convincing. Man, stop this cloak and dagger mess. You guys cannot fall for that now, right? You can't be silly enough to fall for this crap, right? But let's go further. It's convincing and credible, but admitted. Listen to this part right here. This is what I tell you. They don't respect your intelligence. There's no way somebody could write this and respect you, right? So we're going to reread part of that, right? And then we'll read the end sentence of that paragraph right there. And you'll see that they don't respect your capacity of understanding. They just throw something out there and think that you're going to run with it. Listen to what it says. Ahead of the meeting on Monday, a senior EU official indicated that reports from intelligence sources pointed to the existence of a factory inside China producing drones that are shipped to Russia. The unnamed sources described the allegations as convincing and credible. But now the but negates everything that they said right before that. But negates all of that. But admitted there was no clear evidence of direct military cooperation between China and Russia. See that? The but negated everything. But they put that out there because they believe that they can, if they put enough of that out, they can inundate the minds of the people with foolishness like this. But let's just say the credible, quote unquote, sources, all right? Who the hell business is it of theirs? Huh? Talk to me. China is a grown nation. That's a grown nation. They are sovereign, independent nations that have the right to help one another. They are sovereign, independent nations that can do business with each other. Isn't that what America and France and Britain and all of the NATO nations do? And how America skirts the non-proliferation treaty, what I was telling y'all before, I didn't forget, that you're not supposed to transfer any nuclear bombs or anything like that to other territory, and yet she does it in Europe. Huh? What does she call it to skirt that? Oh, we're treaty bound, so it's nuclear sharing. Even though international law prevents that and prohibits that. Nobody says that. Nobody says anything about it. Nobody brings that up. But because it's America, it's okay. Nothing's wrong with that. That exceptional thinking. So think about lashing out at China because you're losing in Ukraine. Lashing out at Russia because Russia is spanking not only Ukraine, but spanking the entirety of the Western world. Huh? Desperation. And then desperation breeds irrational thinking, which brings about insane policies, especially when you're dealing with crazy people. Because as I said, insanity is one doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. America continues to double, triple, and quadruple down on proven failed policies. And they expect somehow, by ratcheting up tensions, by constantly provoking nations that they need to trade with, nations that they need to buy debt with, that somehow things will change in their favor and they'll put the world back the way it was, how it used to be. But I want to let America and everybody who's listening know this. In the grand scheme of things, America, the UK, and the European Union are what we term as Humpty Dumpty. The world order is Humpty Dumpty. And Humpty Dumpty fell off that wall. And we're looking at it having a great fall. And what does it say? All the king horses and all the king men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. No matter what they do, no matter what they try, they cannot reconstitute the old world order that is dying a natural death because it is unjust, unfair, racist, fascist, and immoral and unethical. Tell me where I've lied at. Show me where I've lied at. And if I have not lied to you, then that's something you should think about. Hey, maybe this guy has a point. Maybe there's something to what he's saying. I want you to think about, I'm going to play a little 32-second clip about where they're talking about striking into Russian territory, okay? I want you to listen to this, and then we're going to come back on the back end and replay what Vladimir Putin had to say about if they did this. Now, what if Russia or Iran or China gave Iskander missiles to rebels in Mexico who wanted to take Texas or take California back, and it could strike 300 kilometers or 500 kilometers within the territory of America? Would America just look at the rebels as the ones doing it? Would they then tell Russia, well, this is going too far and this is a declaration of war on us? Huh? We know what they would do. They would tell Russia that this is a declaration of war. So you want us to believe that supplying Scalp missiles or what is the other name for the Scalp missile? I just said it. But also the attackers, Storm Shadows, and then even the Taurus missiles from Germany. That's not a declaration of war on Russia. And remember that Annalena Baerbock was just crying about a possibility that China may be aiding Russia with drones. And now they're talking about supplying devastating missiles to Ukraine. And Ukraine, here's the kicker. Nobody talks about this. Ukraine is not even a NATO member. They're doing this as if Ukraine is a NATO member. That's not provocative. Well, I think President Vladimir Putin thinks it is because he had this to say. If they allow me to play it.
Речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создавать.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
And after knowing that, this is what the Secretary General of the largest terrorist organization in the history of the world, the North Atlantic Terrorist Organization, had to say about supplying deep strike weapons to Ukraine to strike Russia.
Let's not forget, Ukraine is fighting a war of self-defense. And that means that Ukraine has the right to defend itself. And as we know, international law, and according to international law, this right does not end at the border. So that means that supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense means that it is also possible for them to strike legitimate targets on the aggressor's territory. At the end, it's up to each ally to determine its support for Ukraine. That's not up to me. This is for the individual allies in their relationship with Ukraine.
Man, these people are so full of it. Think about this. So Ukraine has, even though the United States instigated this, right? We have Victoria Nuland, we have all of those people on video and audio tape telling you that they spent $5 billion to take Ukraine out of Russia's orbit and to turn Ukraine against Russia. We have a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski where he says that the goal of America should be to take Ukraine out of Russia's orbit of influence, sphere of influence. Because if we break Ukraine away from Russia, then we can prevent Russia from becoming a great power again and relegate it to a regional power, which would be somewhat irrelevant on the global stage, right? We're supposed to ignore that. And all the military bases of NATO that were put in there, right? So there was no provocations. Russia just one day woke up and decided to go into Ukraine and take Ukraine, even though part of Ukraine was historically Russia. Kyiv was Russia. As a matter of fact, Kyiv was the capital of Russia at one point. So you're telling me that NATO, America, that lies some 8,000 miles, 8,000 miles away, has more right to Ukraine than Russia has, right? And then this guy, he's a spin doctor. It's not up to me, the Secretary General of NATO, to determine this. It's individual states of the alliance that determines this. Now check this out. Now he wants to for you to believe that NATO has nothing to do with it. But if Russia strikes these individual nations, then NATO will say collective defense treaty. Who the hell are these people talking to? Huh? The only way to stop the bully is to punch the bully in the mouth. I'm telling you this now, because, again, for those of you who may not know, let me say this again for everybody. I don't advocate war. But what I do advocate is sound judgment, common sense, and rationality, okay? Now, if I'm talking to Ping One in the chat, and Ping One is talking to me, and I'm understanding Ping One, but Ping One is not letting me know that he understands me, right? And I'm constantly going through the motions with him, and every time I think that I have made it through to him, he goes around and does something that was to my detriment. Evidently, what I'm saying to him is not reaching him. So what must I do to convey to him my seriousness on the matter? I must stop trying to speak to him in my mannerism. And the sound, sane, and most rational thing to do is to learn the language of Ping One and then speak to Ping One in his language. So if America and NATO only knows provocations and only knows spin and only knows war, only knows covert operations, then I'm going to give them a whole buffet of it. I'm going to give them a whole buffet of it. And it's not me that's escalating. I'm doing this to de-escalate, to let them know I understand what you're doing. I understand your language. So let me speak it back to you so that you can understand me from this moment on. This is what Russia does not understand. They are talking intelligently and they're talking rational to irrational players. You know, when a person has suffered trauma, right? And they're ecstatic. They're screaming, they're raging, they're crying, they're up and on, and they're panicking, right? And you're trying to talk to them calmly. A lot of times that does not get, even though you guys are English, or even though you may be French or Chinese or whatever, when you talk to them, sometimes because they're in an emotional stage, you can't reach them, right? So what must happen? Sometimes you got to smack them to calm them down and say, hey, whoa, listen to me. Why are not they implementing sound things like that in international policy? If you don't do it, there is a higher chance for escalation. Huh? If you don't do it, there is a higher chance for escalation. So let's go to an article real quick, because we just heard what he said, the NATO Secretary General. We're going to get to a couple more, but the NATO Secretary General. Let's listen to what a Russian, the State Duma chair. The State Duma is like the Senate, right? And they have like the upper house and the lower house. And I believe he may be like the Speaker of the House, if I'm not mistaken, because I believe that woman, I forget her name. I think they have a woman. She is like right higher up than him in the line of succession. And she's in the Russian Parliament also. So listen, what is said right here. This is the title of the article. All right. So what I'm trying to show you guys is listen. War is inevitable because of the hypocrisy, the arrogance, and the exceptionalism. You see how the guy, before I read the article, you see how the guy says Ukraine has a right, according to international law, to defend itself. And that means hitting beyond its border. Well, why was that not the same rationale when Hamas struck out against Israel? Why is that not the same rationale by the West when Hezbollah is striking out against Israel? Because Israel is occupying Palestine. Israel is killing thousands of people. Let me tell you something. I heard somebody say 50,000 people were killed, but I heard former Chief of Staff to Colin Powell, and I've interviewed him before. Larry Wilkerson says the number is well over 100,000 people that were killed. I heard him say that. Well over 100,000 men and women killed, and children killed by Israel. That is genocide. Why don't the Palestinians have that same right under international law to strike outside of Gaza, to strike outside of the West Bank? Or the Lebanese resistance group Hezbollah has that same right to strike outside of Lebanon as Israel continues to bomb and cause carnage and destruction all across the West Asian area. Why is that only reserved for whoever the U.S. and the West designated that is reserved to? Rules for thee, but not for me. That exceptional mind comes into play. Okay? So this article here says, what? Shout out to Khalid. Check this out. Biden wants to take the world with him. Russia's top MP, member of parliament. All right. I want you to listen to what he says. Moscow will respond to long-range missile strikes with Western weapons deep inside the country. State Duma Chair Vyacheslav Volodin has said. The outgoing President Joe Biden is taking the U.S. and the rest of the world down with him by escalating the conflict between Moscow and Kyiv. The chairman of the Russian State Duma stated on Monday. Biden has reportedly removed restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range missiles, according to a New York Times report on Sunday, which described the move as a significant escalation that might provoke a direct response from Moscow. The White House has made no official statement on the matter. Volodin said it appeared that the elderly Biden, nearing the end of his life, is dreaming of eternity and wants to pull America under with him and maybe the entire world as well. If this happens, listen to what he says, because this is very important here. If this happens, Russia will be forced to respond. See, what most people don't understand is the world order that we've known is dying. Russia understands that, but Russia had been a benefactor of that world order too. So Russia is not so in a rush for it to completely collapse. That's why Russia has been so patient and has been doing its best not to escalate into a war with the West. It's not that they're scared of the West. It's that they understand that when this new paradigm takes shape, there will be new poles of power and everything will be redone. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. So they have not been in a rush to reshape the global order until now. Remember, Iran had been telling Russia for the longest, hey, listen, don't trust them. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's connect this and let's do this. Don't honor their sanctions regime. But Russia was honoring it. Why? Because they had a vested interest in maintaining the global order at that time, even though America was the preeminent power. And now they have gotten a taste of the sanctions, the theft, the robbery, the vilification, and now the provocation. And they understand now that it must take place. But they want it to be a controlled change. And you can't control things like this when you have a collapsing, insane, unhinged, irrational former global hegemon that is trying to maintain its position. But reality is starting to dawn on them. And this is what he says. If this happens, Russia will be forced to respond. The manner of the response will be up to the Ministry of Defense, not the foreign ministry. That's very important there. This is what he says. Not the foreign ministry or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If this happens, Russia will be forced to respond. The manner of the response will be up to the Ministry of Defense. That means technical military responses, right? But there will be one. He said, adding that this might even include the use of new weapon systems that Russia has not previously deployed on Ukrainian territory. So we see what is going on. The irrational behavior of irrational people. And they want you to believe that everything is right. Matter of fact, let me play a clip for you all. And I want you to hear what they're saying here, okay? What the world is saying now about all of this stuff that
I think
going
the
on.
actions of the Biden administration are certainly pushing us closer to that. I just have confidence that President Putin
I hope they all play
and
it.
those
I just
within
get the thing.
the real leadership in Western Europe, as opposed to the Biden administration, are not going to allow Biden in his waning days in office to lurch the world into an actual World War III situation. Clearly, the announcement that these weapons are going to be deployed to Ukraine crosses a red line that President Putin and the Russians had announced very clearly. But I think they recognize that Biden is on his way out the door, and that they're not going to let him create a World War III crisis very, very casually. And I know that Western Europe is going to approach it the same way. And I think, again, we'll probably hear from President Trump being cautious, because we have one president at a time. But I think you're going to hear from President Trump shortly.
And let me tell you something. Let me put something in your ear. We're already in World War III. Look at where all these wars are starting. Who is the initiator of them, and who continues to put the embers of fire, blowing the embers of fire, turning them into full-fledged fires across the globe. Everywhere you look, whether it's Africa, Asia, Western Europe, the Middle East, what they call the Middle East, and Latin America, you have the fingerprints of former colonial powers. Everywhere. They are not going to see. Listen, this is something that most people don't understand, and I have to tell it to you. And I know it may not be palatable for you, but it is what it is. Ben can run everything, and that everything has to come through them. And they look at these nations and these leaders and their resources as if they have ownership over them, and they're ready to do whatever to maintain their sway over them. And that's why you have even Latin American leaders are lashing out at the madness that is being displayed by the Western world. Look at what Maduro has to say about this.
Fíjense ustedes, hasta ahora que estamos aquí, los gobiernos de Estados Unidos, Francia y Gran Bretaña, la Santa Alianza del Mal, acaban de aprobarle al nazi criminal de Zelensky en Ucrania que utilice sus misiles y cohetes de largo alcance para atacar a nuestra hermana Rusia. Estoy diciéndoles, un momento definitorio. Yo podría decirles a ustedes que han entrado en la fase de locura el imperialismo norteamericano, en la fase de venganza. Cuidemos Venezuela, cuidemos nuestra tierra, nuestra paz.
The whole world is fed up with this foolishness. The entire world, and they're calling America out. Never did you think that this would happen. Never did you think the day would come when nations would call out America because of her foolishness. Never did you think that. But it is happening right in front of our eyes. The whole world is calling America out on this. Even her allies are saying as much. Fico, the Slovak, I think, prime minister even has something to say about the madness of the West. And this is a NATO ally about what is taking place. This is serious. I want to put facts out to you all to let you guys understand where we are. One world is dying and a new world is coming in. Most people don't understand. Let's look at science for 1 second. Science dictates to us that two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. One must give way to the other, right? And that's what is happening. You have those who have a vested interest in a world order that is dying a natural death, and they're doing everything that they can to maintain that because they are the greatest benefactors of that. And they're trying to prevent something new, something more fairer, more just, more righteous from emerging. So they're preparing even so much to take the world to thermonuclear war. When I kept telling you guys that, people, you heard all those other pundits saying, oh, we can't think that America would do something like that, would really go to that. Well, what you think now? Huh? What you think now? When I kept telling you, you don't build up an arsenal of nuclear arms and spend trillions and trillions upon trillions of dollars to maintain it and upgrade it. To not have it in your mind to use it if your rule is threatened. That's what they say when they say America's interests, Britain's interests, France's interests. That what they're talking about is their rulership, their power, their influence, their wealth and their might. And they are prepared to go to thermonuclear war to try to maintain that which they have become accustomed to. And that is having the advantage over everybody else. It'll seep into your head. Listen to what Fico has to say about this.
Stamped and approved by Washington. The EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, has officially confirmed that the White House is allowing Ukraine to use Western-supplied missiles for long-range strikes against Russia. Now, this comes just 2 months before the Biden administration vacates the Oval Office and hands over the keys to Donald Trump.
The Biden administration has authorized the use of its weapons up to 300 kilometers inside Russian territory. It's not that much by way of a distance, it's not a very long distance, and it doesn't go deep into the country. But this is the decision by the Biden administration. Why they have taken this decision now and not before the elections, I don't know.
Well, for more on this, RT correspondent Donald Quarters joining me in the studio. I mean, Donald, it's a bit of a murky story. I mean, we have Washington, which still is not commenting or refusing to comment. But then the EU's foreign policy chief just comes out with it. What is going on?
Well, that's right. I mean, the White House has been really tight-lipped about this since this became an issue around the world. I mean, and the few statements that we have heard so far have been little more than either than pretty much refusals to either confirm or deny anything that's being said in the media or by politicians. And the latest we have is from the State Department, of course, which, again, hasn't really yielded any sort of decisive information.
What can you tell us about what the current policy is on whether Ukraine can launch long-range missile strikes into Russia using U.S. missiles?
I don't have any policy updates to speak to today. We have made clear that we will always adapt and adjust the capabilities that we provide to Ukraine when it's appropriate to do so, and you have seen us back that up with steps that we have taken over the past several years, but I don't have any new policy developments to speak to today.
This, of course, comes after the New York Times published a report on Sunday citing anonymous officials who are apparently claiming that the White House has given Kiev a green light to use long-range ATACMS missiles to strike deep within Russian territory. And when President Biden was actually asked to confirm or deny this, his response was to turn around and say absolutely nothing.
I mean, it's interesting. So we have the EU foreign policy chief seemingly confirming something that you've just talked us through. The US is being a bit shady about. France said they're only considering it. The UK also is a bit hesitant. Is this just lack of coordination at this stage?
Well, it looks like that, and also a lack of coordination probably between governments and the media, because, I mean, we also saw similar media reports saying, after this New York Times report came out, saying that France and the UK were also greenlighting Kiev to use their Scalps and Shadow Storm missiles to strike deep within Russian territory as well. But again, in terms of officials from these countries, we've either heard a refusal to actually give any sort of definitive comment or comments that basically are telling people that an actual decision has not been come to yet.
What are we hearing within the European bloc at this stage? Has there been any reaction to this news?
Well, there have been some reactions, and it's been quite a mixed bag because, of course, on the one hand, we've heard from Slovakia's prime minister who said he completely disagrees with the Biden administration's decision, and he said that this could lead to an unprecedented escalation of the conflict.
I express my sincere disagreement with the decision of US President Biden to allow the use of American rockets to target the territory of the Russian Federation with a clear goal of completely eroding or dividing peacekeeping efforts. I told the Slovak Republic's Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense not to support the US decision at any international forum or in any other way. This is an unprecedented escalation of tensions. It is surprising how quickly some EU countries welcome this militant step by the US. And this is only confirmation that the EU is unable to formulate its own fundamental foreign policy, and the West wants to continue the war in Ukraine at all costs. The decision by the outgoing US President Biden will also significantly impact the plans of the incoming President Trump, who has publicly expressed interest in ending the war in Ukraine. Slovakia is Ukraine's neighbor and has an existential national state interest in peace in Ukraine. He who wishes to continue the war and welcomes the useless militant steps of the West harms the Slovak national state interest. US President Biden's clear-cut position, above all, harms Ukraine itself.
At the same time, other European leaders have essentially come out in complete support of the White House, like Germany's foreign minister and the Polish president. They both have essentially already justified Washington's actions.
In light of the recent decision from the U.S., I want to emphasize that this is not a reevaluation, but rather an intensification of the support already provided by other partners, and it is crucial at this moment.
These are missiles that have a range of up to 300 kilometers. These are not the kind of missiles that can hit targets such as St. Petersburg or Moscow or other large cities remote from Ukraine. These are not the kind of missiles that can be used across Russia.
I mean, we've heard in the past from the Russian leader how he would see such a green light. I mean, it was pretty obvious that he said that this would be a red line that would just, for Moscow, would be completely beyond crossing. Has there been recently any reaction?
Absolutely. I mean, Moscow's warned Washington time and time again about taking a decision like this. We heard from Vladimir Putin at one point saying that this would be considered a serious threat for Russia. We've heard from Russia, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, who said that Russia would likely have to commit to a tit-for-tat response to this. But most recently, we heard from the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, who said that the West would be squarely to blame for any Ukrainian strikes deep on Russian territory using Western weaponry.
These strikes are not carried out by Ukraine. These strikes are carried out by those countries that give permission. Targeting and other services are not carried out by the Ukrainian military. This is done by military specialists from these same Western countries, and this fundamentally changes the modality of their involvement in the conflict. This is the danger and provocation of this situation.
Now, it's important we don't forget something else the Russian president at one point said as well, that he believes that Russia has the right to respond in kind to strikes on Russian territory that the government believes to be the fault of the West. So if this is all actually very true, I mean, this would be an escalation to the conflict in terms of proportions that we have not seen until this point.
And at a time where it's very clear what the course is taking place on the battlefield as more and more talks of peace, and then suddenly what seems like such a dangerous escalation. That was RT correspondent Donald Quarter joining me. Thank you, John.
You see how Fico said, hey, listen, man, I'm not with this. I have authorized my people to condemn what America and some of my NATO partners are doing. And then you had the Polish president and others. Oh, these are only 300-kilometer missiles. They're not there to really threaten Russia. Okay, then if that's and I would play that when I use 300-kilometer Iskanders to destroy everything within 300 kilometers. And I'll say, oh, NATO, I don't want to know why you're upset about. We only struck within 300 kilometers of NATO territory. This wasn't meant to just destroy NATO. See, the spin doctors, if you don't pay attention, because these people do not respect your intelligence. They come before you and try to make light of that. Oh, this is not to threaten inner Russia. Well, what about outer Russia? What about the periphery of Russia? What about all of those civilians and all the civilian infrastructure and all of that stuff there? Whether it's 1 mile or 50 miles within Russia, it's Russia. Would America allow Cuba to strike within 1 mile in Florida? Would America allow Mexico to strike 20 miles inside of the United States? But no, because they're doing it, it's okay. Shout out to Joel Bradford in the building. I can't highlight your stuff today. My cat broke my mouse. And I didn't know it when I got here. So, and I had to jump on to do the show. So I didn't have a chance to get a new mouse. So on this computer, I can't highlight. I got a mouse on these so I can talk to you in the chat. I'll try to highlight it with my fingers. I just don't like the way that feels on the tip of my fingers, everybody. I don't like that. But anyway, so I'm gonna tell, and I've told you guys over and over again on this platform, one of the main reasons why they are escalating. Ukraine has fertile soil. They want to make and U.S. corporations, especially those that are affiliated with Joe Biden's son, had invested heavily in that Black Earth area of Ukraine. Ukraine has huge amounts of coal reserves, right? That was used to help when Europe needed coal and all of that stuff. They were getting it from the Donbass. That's why the Donbass is a critical region. That's why they're refusing to let go of the Donbass. And also, outside of Russia, Ukraine has, I think, the second or the largest gas and oil reserves in Europe. So if in huge amounts. So they want to, well, it no longer has it because all of that is part of Russia now. And BlackRock and all of these corporations are literally forcing the U.S. and the Western governments to go to war to try to get this Black Earth, to get these coal reserves, to get this oil and gas, so that they can make profits. So they do not care about life. So don't let them fool you with that. They're pushing this for war so that they can steal the resources and dominate the region. If the U.S. and the UK are allowed to take Ukraine to bring it into its orbit, NATO will essentially become, the Black Sea will become a NATO lake, just like they are trying to do with the Baltic Sea. And they have eyes on the Caspian Sea. They're trying to dominate the Mediterranean, the Red Sea. They want to dominate the Persian Gulf and all of the surrounding areas. This is a plan so that they can decapitate Russia, China, Iran economically. Because remember, they didn't just do this with Ukraine. They did this step by step, gobbling up smaller former Soviet nations, changing their political orientation to the West. And they become client states in the United States and make a mint, because instead of these nations buying Russian weapons, they are then forced to buy U.S. weapons, which means that there must be upkeep and upgrades, which continues to go into the military industrial complex thing. And it is no coincidence that the nations that they hit, Syria, Libya, and all of the surrounding areas, Yemen, and all these people had Russian weapons. They're trying to keep the military industrial complex afloat by reorienting these nations towards Western weapons, which we see on the battlefield are no comparison to Russians. But it puts money in the pockets of the war secretary, who sits on the board of these war corporations. All of these people, this revolving door where they make money, go into college institutions and teach this dogma so that they can continue to enrich themselves, enrich the thief, enrich the thieves, and keep the people on leashes. And they spill blood by the hundreds of thousands, and they don't bat an eye. Boy, that's cold-blooded. That's cold-blooded. I played a clip. Man, I'm going to play this 13-second clip again. I'm going to tell you that these people really want to dominate. Listen to what this guy said. You know he's a lunatic.
I'm absolutely sure if the Russians did not have nuclear weapons, we would have been in Ukraine, kicking them out. We would have. But they have nuclear weapons, so it's not the same as in Afghanistan.
So he said he's absolutely sure that if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, NATO would have went into Ukraine. Well, check this out. Let's just look at this for a minute before we posit to something right here. If NATO would have gone in there, then the armed forces of NATO would have been torn up. Think about what I'm saying. According to the US and according to the UK, the first version of the Ukrainian armed forces were the most highly skilled, trained, and armed in Europe. In Europe, the only nation that they were not better than was the United States. And Russia has destroyed them 3 times, going on the 4th time. Now, if that is the case, then what do you think would happen if NATO would have intervened militarily? Talk to me. Just talk to me. Just talk to me. I'm serious. But because they are so living in the past, they're living on the fumes of empire of what the power that NATO used to have, the influence that NATO used to have, the wealth and the position that NATO used to enjoy. It doesn't dawn on them that there is a new paradigm and that NATO is no longer the NATO of 40 years ago and Russia is not the nation of 40 years ago. No. Things have changed dramatically and we're living in a new world. And this world is not pretending for the U.S. and NATO to dominate everybody's space and to force everybody into subjugation and submission to their will. That's why this guy, listen, Dmitry Medvedev said it good. He showed you what America and the West does. Listen,
Americans always try to rule by creating crises on the planet. This was the case, well, at least in the 20th century, and it continues that way in the 21st. When the Soviet Union collapsed, America felt that it had no equal at all after the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. So the more crises they create, the better they think the situation is for America. Well, they've created a crisis with these sanctions. What happens? It's all very simple. The Americans make money. America, as always, feels good. It makes money from weapons supplies and by allocating money to its defense industry. Sure enough, some of that money gets stolen in Ukraine or somewhere else. Still, though, it means that the defense industry and a lot of other economic mechanisms in the United States continue to work. Moreover, a lot of businesses have been persuaded to move over to the United States from Europe, where it has become unprofitable to work. That is, the Americans are getting what they want at the price of more blood and casualties. This is why Americans are engaging in feeding the war. But that system is coming to an end. That's why they feel the world is falling out from under their feet, and they're resisting it in every way possible. You've mentioned BRICS here, and there's also the SCO, as well as other regional unions. There are Asian unions that are very important in today's world and where America has no say at all. It is seen as hostile there, even though those unions were not originally created as anti-American. In fact, I find the idea of the Global South and these kind of unions very promising. Why? The Americans and their satellites keep saying, you are violating the rule-based order. But when you ask them what that order is, and I've deliberately picked through legal text, studied them, it's incomprehensible. It's not clear what the order is and who approved it. It's really just an idea of the United States and its allies, well, mostly in NATO, of how best to do business in the world. So it's not a written document, not an international convention, it's not a UN act or any other act, it's not the UN Charter. It's just something, an order that they think is right. And once you're out of this order, you're a perpetrator. Of course, this is a very unstable system that is bound to collapse sooner or later. And those inside that system will suffer the most from its collapse. I'm absolutely sure about that.
Once again, you want me to believe that this is not an escalation towards war? We're already in a global war, but you're telling me that this is not another step in escalation? And you want me to believe that the American empire is not trying to stoke people for war? Again, I might add, all I can say to you is this, again.
What you talking about, Willis?
So I'm just telling you. I mean, I'm nobody's fool. You're nobody's fool. But we have to go to something, because as they were talking, I said, you know what, let me just look up psychopath. Just let me look at psychopath. And it says this right here. A psychopath is a noun. A person affected by chronic mental disorder with abnormal or violent social behavior. See, in America, we wonder why everybody is violent. We wonder why everybody is confrontational. I continue to tell you that they get it from the government. The policies that America exhibit internationally is exhibited domestically. It's a reflection. They mirror each other. So there's no sanctity and care of life, liberty, or the rule of law here, right? And when we look around when America goes into Syria, Libya, and the stoking of tensions and the stealing of Ukraine's gold, everybody always omit that part. When the Maidan took place, America went in there and stole Ukraine's gold, just like they did Libya, and they tried to do it to Syria. They did it to Iraq. These people are killed just for that because they got to keep this scheme going. They have to do that. So this thing says a person, it can be a nation, it can be an organization, it can be a group of people affected by chronic mental disorder with abnormal or violent social behavior. A madman or a madwoman, mad person, a deranged person, listen to this, a maniac, a lunatic, an unstable and aggressive person. That, you're telling me that does not describe the U.S. and NATO? Huh? You gotta be kidding me. So everybody hit that like button. Before we go further and I read this article here, I'm gonna play something for you, right? And I want you to pay close attention to this. Hit the like button. And I want to remind you all to join us at 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We're gonna Gregory Mannarino. We're scheduled. If some come up, it's not on me. We're scheduled for Gregory Mannarino, the Robin Hood of Wall Street is supposed to be on the platform. And the next day, we have Brian Berletic of the New Atlas on the show. And then in the coming days, we're going to have my guy from Calibrated, Scott of Calibrated, coming up soon too. And we got a couple more guests coming up in the near future. Okay, so you guys got to hit the like button, subscribe. Even if we don't agree on every issue, let's be adults to be able to be agreeable to disagree. All right? Let's not act like these people, these children, these spoiled children in London and Brussels and Berlin and Paris and in Washington, D.C. Let's act like adults. Remember, when I was a child, I did childish things. I spake as a child. I walked as a child. But now that I'm no longer a child, I put away those childish things. This is something that should be in the mind of those people. All right. So, I'll read the article first, then I'll play the clip. So, this is an article on RT, and it's talking about Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it says Biden going against voters on Ukraine war. U.S. lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene has lashed out at the president for reportedly green-lighting long-range strikes against Russia by Kiev. U.S. President Joe Biden is dangerously trying to start World War III before he leaves office in January, Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has claimed. Now stop right there for a minute. We're already in World War III. What he's doing is escalating to the nuclear threshold. One world is coming in and another world is going out. By definition, that is a world war. All right? But this man wants to take it to nuclear Armageddon because America is losing her footing, her position, her sway, her wealth. Because that's why she's always said, we're the indispensable nation. We're the nation that sits upon the hill. America must lead. America must rule. America must do. Why? I want everybody with a sound, rational brain for a second to think of this. When they say America must lead, let us see where she's led us to. See, this is a qualifier or a disqualifier for anybody. If you're trying to be the CEO of a company or the CFO of a company, right, or the CIO of the company, they interview you and they look at your past track record, right? and they see if you are qualified to lead that country to or that company into a bright future. Now, we must apply that to now America. Look at where she's leading the nation to. We are on the brink of thermonuclear Armageddon. That disqualifies her for leading us anywhere else, because I'm not getting in that car with her. She's drunk. And I know it's foggy, the street lights are out, and I know she can't see the stop sign up because she keeps running stop signs. I'm not getting in that car with her. So she can lead you, but she's not leading me anywhere, because I know where that ends. Okay? And then if we look again, this is what Hungary's foreign minister says. Hungary's Szijjártó believes U.S. Brussels could turn Ukraine conflict into a global one. It is already global. But he says this, Moscow from Sputnik, it says Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said on Monday that Brussels and Washington could spread the conflict in Ukraine to the rest of the world amid reports that the West had authorized long-range strike weapons against Russian territory. He says the pro-war mainstream in Brussels and Washington has launched a last desperate. Listen, did I tell you they were desperate? This is a member of NATO saying this now. The pro-war mainstream in Brussels and Washington has launched a last desperate attack on the new reality, right? The new reality. What is it? The new paradigm of a new world outside of the scope of British and U.S. domination. They're saying this. And I've been telling you guys this for the longest. All right? I've been saying this for the longest. So let me play this clip. I know the time is running out. And please hit the like button or hit the dislike button, whichever one, but hit one of them. Okay? Because we all of us got to do something to make this thing go. I'm already censored. I've been taken out of the search engine. They continue to suppress my numbers, even though I have the same guests that everybody else had, and I have them sometimes before other major channels. This is what I get. Please let us beat the algorithm and hit the like button or the dislike button, whichever one, okay? And also remember, you can like and share, okay? But let's go to this clip here. I want you to listen to this.
Right, let's cross now live to author and former British diplomat, Ian Proud. Ian, it's good to have you join me now. So, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin has said that using long-range missiles will not change the situation on the battlefront. So the question is, so why allow Kiev to use ATACMS if they're not going to change the situation in the battlefront?
Well, this is a last gasp attempt by a sort of failing Biden administration to go out and escalate the war, knowing that President Trump, when he comes in, actually wants to have negotiations to bring an end finally to this dreadful war, which serves nobody's purposes. It's quite a cynical and unconscionable move, in my personal opinion.
Now, with Joe Biden being a lame duck leader who's leaving the White House in 2 months, the Republicans currently control Congress and are assuming the presidency in January. Is there anything they can do to block the Democrats' military moves before then?
We've already seen, actually, some quite vocal statements from people on the Republican side of politics in the US criticizing this last gasp attempt by Biden to escalate the war. So I think actually you'll see that increasingly over the next kind of day or so, where Republicans come out and criticize this move and say that actually it's an unnecessary escalation that's kind of creating risks for safety in Europe, but also safety for kind of US, French and UK assets in particular. Nothing good can come out of this, but I don't think they can necessarily block it. However, I should imagine that behind the scenes, Trump and his team are kind of thinking about ways in which they can signal to Russia that they actually want to win the war.
All right. Do you think this escalatory move has been Biden's decision, or there are some real force in charge somewhere?
Well, to be honest, the people driving policy on Ukraine have been the same people that were in charge in 2014, the likes of kind of Jake Sullivan, who was actively involved in the overthrow of Yanukovych in 2014. He's still the national security advisor, even though she's been sidelined. The likes of Victoria Nuland and people on that sort of neocon side of republicanism. The deep state is kind of very active here. I don't think Kamala Harris plays a role, and Joe Biden is, most of the time having an afternoon nap, quite frankly. So I think, the deep state interests, including the massive military-industrial complex, in the US, is kind of very much keen to continue this war and gain billions and billions in further profit from it at Ukraine's expense.
Right now, while countries of the global south have tried to come up with peace initiatives, the West keeps ramping the conflict up. Why is that?
Well, the Biden administration keeps ramping it up, although it's done it in a very, very incremental way. They still cling to this idea that somehow Ukraine can deliver some sort of strategic, victory in a war that's very evidently kind of losing on the battlefield, as your report said, earlier. Lots of kind of, even the New York Times had a piece in the last day or so saying that this is a proxy war, by the US. And actually kind of they should end it as soon as they possibly can. So even kind of moderate voices in the US are turning against this ridiculous kind of, dangerous policy of the Biden administration.
All right, we have to leave you here now. I am proud, former British diplomat and author. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.
Shout out to everybody that's watching. Ping One says, great analogy, Rashid. Biden's asleep at the wheel again. He's drunk, and all of the people in charge are drunk. And I'm not getting in that car because it's foggy, it's slippery, it's rained, and they've run a whole bunch of lights, a whole bunch of stop signs, and there's a bridge out up there over the cliff, and I'm not getting in that car. They can drive it as fast as they want to, wherever they want to, but I'm not getting in that car with them. You can forget that. Now, somebody also asked me in my emails, because I have a lot of screens up, why isn't this streaming on Rumble today? Well, last night my son a dozen times set the show on Rumble, and each time we went to make sure it was up, after it was set, it disappeared. I don't know what happened, but every time he set it for Rumble, it disappeared. So 4 days this morning, about 4 o'clock or something, he said it again. It didn't show up. So I don't know why it happened. I think that might be the second time that's happened to the show. I can't do anything about it. All I can do is try to set it and continue to do this, and we'll keep it pushing, keep it moving. Remember to hit us on all our platforms. We're on Twitch, Twitter, Odyssey, Rumble, now on BitChute. Go join up on it's free on the Locals channel, the empowermentoftruth.locals.com. Hit us up on Twitter, do all of this stuff. Now, I want to say this in closing, because I've enjoyed the conversation that we've had. Thank you, everybody, from the bottom of my heart to the depth of my soul, because you did not have to sit here and give me your time. I want to look you in your eyes and tell you that as a man, I am very grateful that you chose to listen to the Red Pill Diaries. And even if we don't agree, maybe something resonated with you in your soul. So I'm going to say this to you, and hopefully this will resonate. Do right by others, not because there's some great reward, right? Or because other people are watching. Do right by others because it's the right thing to do. Because remember, even when no one else is watching, God Almighty is watching. So I'm going to close out the way I always close out, with love in my heart for each and every one of you who loves truth. Know that I love you, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true. But above all things, remember to stay righteous. Hey, mama, I hope I made you proud. Your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you all for joining me. We're out of here. Peace.